Ja, promet je sektor, ki je odgovoren za tretjino emisij toplogrednih plinov, te še vedno rastejo, a je tudi hkrati sektor, kjer je potencial za zmanjšanje emisij največji. Za leto 2020, kot lahko vidite na levi vetrnici, to je iz podnebnega ogledala, smo dosegli le en kazalec na področju prometa in sicer dosegali smo cilje obnovljivih virov energije in še to na račun škodljivih biogoriv, katerih proizvodnja ogroža prehransko varnost in povzroča deforestacijo. Zaradi zaprtja javnega potniškega prometa med pandemijo smo temu sektorju storili tudi ogromno škodo in po zadnjih podatkih se še ni vrnil na stanje iz 2019. Skratka, tudi na drugih področjih smo zelo slabo dosegali zastavljene kazalce. Zdaj, kako bomo zmanjšali emisije toplogrednih plinov v prometu, pa tudi druge negativne učinke, kot so onesnažen zrak, hrup, raba prostora, raba naravnih virov in pa tudi visoke družbene stroške, ki jih povzročajo negativni učinki prometa, je zdaj zelo pomembno vprašanje. Nam se zdi, da je nujno, da začnemo izvajati ukrepe, ki bodo zmanjšali motorno prometno aktivnost. Ne bo dovolj zgolj, da se zanašamo na tehnologijo. Vemo, da je proizvodnja vodika in e-goriv, o katerih je zdaj zelo popularno govoriti, energetsko zelo potratna. Vemo, da za proizvodnjo ta goriva potrebujejo zelo veliko energije, ki naj bi jo vzeli iz obnovljivih virov energije, vendar vemo, da jih manjka tudi na drugih sektorjih bolj pomembnih in zato se nam zdi, da ti energenti niso primerni za cestni promet. Imamo tudi druge rešitve, elektrifikacija, ki je veliko bolj učinkovita, vendar si ne želimo, da bi zdaj vas vozni park zamenjali z električnimi vozili, če govorimo o osebnih avtomobilih, ampak moramo res stremeti k javnemu prevozu in se oddaljiti od lastništva avtomobilov, ki nas zelo drago stane. Namreč, kot lahko vidite na drugem grafu, ki ste ga danes že videli, smo Slovenci v samem vrhu EU po deležu, ki ga gospodinjstva namenjajo za mobilnost, to je nekje 17%, zelo veliko, ker smo desetletja večinoma vlagali v cestno infrastrukturo, javni prevoz pa zanemarjali, ni vedno dostopen, ni učinkovit, je zelo veliko prebivalcev prisiljenih v lastništvo avtomobila, da lahko zagotovijo neke osnovne potrebe po mobilnosti. In mobilnostna revščina je pojav, ki obstaja tudi pri nas. Zdaj, zaradi prometa se raba goriva povečuje, cene goriv se višajo, nekatere vlade, tudi naša, pa nižajo davke na to umazano fosilno gorivo za blaženje energetske draginje, kar po eni strani ni pravično, predvsem do okolja, ni prav, da spodbujamo potratno vožnjo in da se odmikamo od načela onesnaževalec plača. Tiste najbolj ranljive skupine bi morali gotovo reševati na kak drug način. Ampak obstajajo tudi pozitivne zgodbe in primeri dobrih praks na nacionalni in lokalni ravni, o dveh bomo slišali več v nadaljevanju. Prva je povezana s spodbujanjem rabe javnega potniškega prometa, ki ga pri nas še vedno obravnavamo marginalno in ga ne prepoznamo kot pomemben potencial. Druga pa je vezana na lokalno raven. Nekatere občine v Sloveniji res ogromno energije in časa vlagajo v trajnostno mobilnost, ki ljudje počasi začenjajo tudi živeti. Pred kratkim smo dobili tudi zakon o celostnem prometnem načrtovanju, ki ureja nastanek celostno-prometnih strategij na nacionalni, regionalni in lokalni ravni. Pri teh strategijah, kot jih nekateri, ki jih poznate, že dobro veste, je pa zelo pomembno to, da je velik poudarek na iskanju trajnostnih rešitev skupaj z občani. Šolske ulice, kolobusi, prevozi starejših na klic, kolesarski zajtrki, pešbusi in številne druge iniciative, del katerih smo bili tudi v Focusu in v Monoteri in jih v Sloveniji res ni malo, pa so primeri skupnostnih projektov, ki si jih lahko želimo samo še več. Hvala.
Hvala za iztočnico in zdaj bomo pa najprej prisluhnili mednarodni izkušnji, nato pa slovenski. Tako da z nami bo zdaj v živo, vendar nadaljavo, Johannes Russmann, ki je referent za prometno politiko pri NABU, Nemškem združenju za ohranjanje narave in biotske raznovrstnosti, in že več kot 2 leti koordinira zavezništvo za družbeno sprejemljiv mobilnostni prehod. In sicer gre za široko koalicijo sindikatov, socialnih, okoljskih združenj in tudi protestantske cerkve. Tudi Johannes nam bo predstavil delo te koalicije, pa tudi izkušnje z vozovnico za 9 evrov.
Johannes, we are ready, so the floor is yours.
Okay, well, thank you, Jonas, and thank you very much for the invitation to talk at your panel and your event today. My name is Johannes Russmann, and I work as a transport policy officer at NABU, which is Germany's biggest environmental NGO with about 800,000 members and 70,000 volunteers across the country. And I'm based at the headquarters in Berlin, where we are 9 people, soon to be 10 probably, in the team covering mainly road and ship transport. And today I'm here to talk about about our broad coalition we founded for fair mobility transition 2 years ago, and our experience especially with the 9 euro ticket, which was all dominant this year. And yes, it got introduced in summer and probably was the biggest experience in public transport we ever had. If you have any questions, please ask, or at the end, I think there's some room for some discussion. First of all, this is what I will talk about today. I want to start with some points about the transport sector and why we are talking about it. Then I want to introduce you our broad coalition I just mentioned that we founded 2 years ago. And then I will tell you some things about our experiences with the 9 euro ticket. Okay, so why is the transformation of the transport sector of such vital importance? First, it's the CO2 emissions. The transport sector is one of the main CO2 emitters in the EU, and 1/4 of all CO2 emissions in the EU comes from the transport sector. And the share of transport emissions increased dramatically since 1990, and this is due to increasing road traffic over the past decades. So within the sector, it's the road transport which is responsible for the majority of the emissions. As you can see here on the figure, I'm very sorry, it's in German. It's a EU figure, but very strangely I couldn't find it in English. But I think it's quite clear what is shown here. So you see 70% is road transport, and within these 70%, 60% is passenger cars. So it's the road traffic basically where we have the highest potential of reducing these emissions, and as well as the most options and alternatives. So these figures show, I think, that the transport sector needs to be deeply transformed. I just want to shortly show you the legal situation in Germany concerning climate protection. So because this is quite important to understand why we have this discussion right now we are having. The cabinet decided to reduce transport emissions to 86 million tons in 2030. And the baseline year is 1990 with 165 million tons. And now you see the big problem we have since then, which is over 30 years ago, we managed to reduce only a little under 10%, which is basically nothing. And hence, it's an enormous task since we need to decrease emissions by almost 50% until the end of this decade. So this shows the huge problem basically we're facing. And we won't manage that by more efficiency, like a lot of politicians try to argue, but only with sufficiency and, of course, decarbonization. That's the only thing which makes it possible to really get the goal we are legally binded to. So, and this is the last complicated looking figure I have. This is the projection we have by the federal government this year published, and we see a giant gap of 41 million tons CO2 equivalents in 2030. So, and this is including the already adopted measures, which are legally binding now. So if nothing happens or nothing more happens, in 2030 we have this gigantic gap. I think you can see my cursor now, my mouse. So this is basically what we are fighting for, to somehow get close to the gap. And it's not a question of how, but it's a question of political will. So this shows we don't have any time left to get things changed dramatically. But it's not only the emissions, moreover, it's also the point of social participation, because especially in Germany, we see a big lack of social participation in the transport sector. For example, households with low income are disadvantaged or highly disadvantaged, especially in rural areas where people depend on cars because of bad infrastructure in the public transport, as well as pretty high prices. And this is just want to explain you very briefly the social dimension, but it is important. And at the same time, people with low income are generally affected higher by the negative effect of transport, although they contribute less to the emissions. And this is, of course, not only a German problem, but this is the same thing all around the world. And here, by these negative effects, I mean air pollution and noise, these kinds of emissions. So the environmental costs of transport emissions are not covered by the polluter pays principle, but by everyone, and socially deprived people suffer from that particularly. So in conclusion, a mobility transition is not only needed for environmental reasons, but also for social ones. And when we talk about a fair mobility transition, we have to address manifold interests. So mobility as a basic right for everyone means for most people freedom, but at the same time, the transport sector is crucial for the economy, especially in Germany with its strong car industry. And due to the variety of interests, political decision makers were hesitant to implement a real transition. So the yellow vest protests in France a couple of years ago was taken as an example that, for example, a transition will lead to social upheavals. So if we want to conduct such a transformation, which we definitely need, we need to combine different interests and address different worries and needs of society. Otherwise, we will eventually fail. So this is basically the same problem, or the problem we are facing as an environmental NGO working on traffic for years and years. Now we see just a very little change, which has happened in Germany. And it's because we are only talking about CO2 emissions. The transport sector is so much more than only CO2 emissions. So that's why we founded this coalition of 10 strong stakeholders of civil society to show decision makers that the civil society demands for this transformation, and also to combine these the know-how of these heterogeneous players. And together we represent millions and millions of people in Germany. And yeah, as I just said, these partners are very heterogeneous. For example, we have environmental organizations such as us or the BUND, and also worker unions or unions, and pretty much unlikely partners until then. For example, the IG Metall, you see the logo here on the top right. It's the world's biggest union. They, for instance, inter alia, represent the interest of the workers in the car industry. So their position obviously is very far away, well, where you would think, from the ones of environmental NGOs, but that's been in the past. We get closer and closer in what we actually want. And well, we also have Verdi, the union supporting or representing the employees of public transport. But we also have the two biggest social organizations, ZOVD and the VDK here in Germany, as well as the Protestant Church in Germany. Oops, sorry, what happened now? Oh, sorry. Okay. So after a long process, what do we do? Just as a short introduction to our work. After a long process of coalition building, we worked on our main position paper, you see here on the right, for over 1 year. It's been like, yeah, very intense working groups, meeting every week, once or twice for a couple of hours. And this paper is about like 50 or 60 pages long, and it functions as our like content baseline. And we have clustered the transport sector into 4 columns, which are social participation, health and life quality, mobility, economy, and cultural change. And we formulated a vision we all share, and then derived the clear political measures for decision makers. So that was very important for us, not to formulate this vision, but in the end, look, okay, what has to be done in Germany, so we could go to politicians and say, okay, this broad coalition is supporting all these measures as a whole. So what else? We write position papers on current topics. We conduct political events. Also, just a month ago, to the topic of the €9 ticket. All over the country we do it and try to frame the political debate. And our narrative is a positive one, because the debate about transport policy and traffic is always very emotional, and people are very scared, afraid that maybe the Greens want to take the cars away, transportation is going to more expensive and not possible for everyone. So we try to have this positive narrative and try to enhance that climate policy is welfare policy, and climate policy is not against welfare policy, and that the transition is more than necessary and will have positive effects on all parts of society. And thus the latter needs to be included in the decision-making process. And we claim, for us at least, that we're a platform for the needed dialogue, and we can communicate it into the heart of society, because all of our partner organizations have regional branches all over the country which function as multipliers, and big parts of the society support this transformation, and thus it's possible to implement it. That's basically the message we are sending. And now I would like to come to a current example in the German politics that reflects the coalition manifold terms of reference. And that is the €9 ticket. I don't know if you heard about it or if you know what it is, but first I want to have some words to the context, because due to the rising prices this year for energy and exploding inflation, the government launched a number of initiatives to financially discharge the people. So in total, we had in Germany like 3, it's called Entlastungspakete. It's hard to translate. It's probably discharge packages maybe. With a volume of over €60 billion. So the Minister of Finance, you see here on the left, Christian Lindner, a liberal, enforced a tax reduction on fuels to the European minimum for 3 months. So that basically meant a tax relief for gasoline of almost 30 cents per liter and over 14 cents for diesel, which summed up in subsidies for gasoline and diesel of up to €3.1 billion. And he was hardly criticized for that, obviously, because for the Greens it was a very bitter pill to swallow, because this subsidies incites the use of gas instead of saving it. And only people driving cars were to profit. So in return, the Greens, you see here on the right, Minister Habeck, the Minister for Economy and Climate Protection. In return, the Greens got the €9 ticket. And what was the ticket? I don't know if you know. From June till August, everyone in Germany could use the public transport and all over the country. No long distance trails, those, but the regional traffic, trains and buses, subways, everything, for €9 a month. So the federal government subsidized this measure with 2.5 billion euros over these 3 months. And to underline again, this instrument came absolutely surprisingly out of nowhere. It was never talked about, would never be possible to even think about this idea, and suddenly it was there. Nobody ever talked about this measure ever before. And yes, as I just told you, it was rather a result of political negotiations for peace in the coalition. And over this mentioned time span, 52 million tickets were sold. And it was very, very well perceived all over the nation, basically. So since the implementation of the ticket was not a long-planned instrument, the ongoing debate about it was multidimensional. Different stakeholders had different demands considering the effects of the ticket, and our coalition was able to reflect at least most of them. So the question is, what are we actually talking about when we talk about the €9 ticket? Are we talking about climate policy? So the question, is it an appropriate instrument for saving CO2 emissions in like reasonable amounts? And if yes, what are the avoidance costs? Are we talking about like transport policy? Is the ticket the big thing for an overall mobility transition? Or are we talking about welfare policy? So does it really help low-income households in a significant way? And if yes, in what way does it help them? So obviously public transport cannot answer all of these questions within 3 months. So the debate was overloaded, although this measure was supported by most people, as I just said, all over the country. Yeah, I'm sorry, but I have to give you this map to understand the debate for the past few months we had in Germany. You need the background information, how public transport is organized in Germany. And as you can see by the map, it's pretty complicated. Public transport is not organized by the federal government, but the regional rail traffic is organized by the state, and the public road traffic by the municipalities and or the cities. So in each state, different companies implement and engage in the transports, and they are all part of a local association. So overall, you see this here on the map, we have over 70 of those associations, and each of these associations has its own ticket, its own prices, its own app, and they are all not connected with each other. And so if you want to travel over land by public transport, in some areas you need 3 or 4 tickets from different associations to different prices. And this has always been the big problem in social transport in Germany. And now the crucial part is the financing, of course. Like inter alia, the federal government gives money to the states, and they are called the regionalization funds. I don't know, it's just the translation. So they can finance the public transport. And currently it's 10 billion euros a year. And this is actually quite important to bear in mind, because I will talk about this later again. So what did we get in the end? The big milestone with the €9 ticket was the dismantling of the just mentioned transport associations with its different rates and fares. This was a topic for years and years and years. And the federal government always said, well, it's about the states, they have to solve this problem. And the state said, well, it's about the federal government to solve this problem. So suddenly the federal government showed, if it's the political will, within a couple of weeks, these association borders were more or less gone for at least 3 months. So yeah, this was claimed for a long time by numerous stakeholders to make the public transport basically more attractive. But yeah, it was the question of responsibility, and the €9 ticket was a clear sign that the federal government can change things in public transport, yeah, if the political will is there, as I just said. And yeah, moreover, the €9 ticket was a game changer for social participation. And suddenly households with low or no income were able to take part in social life in a completely different manner. They were able to visit relatives in other regions in Germany, or could go on trips to recreational reasons. And these activities increased, a lot of studies showed, and hence the ticket improved the life quality for a lot of people with low income. And yeah, the study shows that people have been more mobile, especially with a net income lower than 1,200 euros. So we see an increase of mobility for those people. And public services like going to the doctors were definitely and suddenly more feasible. But there's a big but. The transport companies and services, as well as their infrastructure, was heavily overstrained. At that time, you see here the picture. This was basically the normal situation on train stations during the summer this year. And the implementation of the ticket came in a moment where in a lot of different regions, nationwide, companies and municipalities were cutting down services, and not extending them, but cutting them down because lack of employees and lack of money. And this was basically due to rising operational expenses. And as I just said, yeah, the lack of employees because of very bad working conditions in public transport. So it's bad pay, night shifts, and so on and so forth. So this is because the mentioned regionalization fund was not sufficient in the last years. And in the past, the public transport was very poorly financed. And that's why the perception of the ticket was twofold and not only supported by all stakeholders. And as you can imagine, the union, especially the union supporting the interests of employees in public service, were not a big fan, or rather a harsh critic of the ticket, at least not the idea itself, but the ticket, how it was implemented in the summer. From just suddenly 50 million people buying this ticket, using public transport without any change of operating skills. So one of the central questions during this implementation of the ticket was how latter influences and or affects the mobility behavior across the country. Very important if we talk about the prolonging of this offer. Just for your background, it was when it was introduced in May, it was clearly stated that it will be only implemented for 3 months and then that's it. But over time, because it had so much support, people and also politicians talked about prolonging it, although the transport minister wasn't a big fan of it. But of course, you have to talk about what are the actual effects and of mobility behavior across the country. And it's firstly very hard to answer because the data was not there at that time and still is not completely. And for example, just to show you how difficult to answer this question is, the Association of Transport Companies, called Dovolj, released a study in August, which stated a fair model shift from cars towards public transport. So basically great news. And it was taken up by the media, and a lot of articles were published also in Spiegel in like big newspapers, which certified the ticket a very positive climate impact. So savings of about 2 million tons CO2 equivalents. And there was, I think in June or July, so midterm of the ticket. But unlikely, this study was very optimistic because other assessments, which were published later, don't share that optimistic point of view. So it's basically a question of data. For example, the Leibniz Institute for Wirtschaftsforschung comes to completely different results. People who bought the ticket lived rather in cities than in rural areas. They had closer distances to the next stop and owned fewer cars. That led to a crucial point of critique, because where there is no public transport, it can simply not be used. So moreover, the ticket led to additional traffic, what at least we as the environmental NGO actually do not really want. And this mainly for leisure travel. So there was no significant shift from cars to public public transport. And hence the €9 ticket does not seem to be a cost-effective measure for short-term climate protection. It's a bit of a pill, but it looks like it. And the quoted study estimated the following, the ticket saved, the kilometers saved traveled by cars were 15 kilometers for people who just bought the ticket and 8 kilometers for those who own an annual ticket. So that comes to a saving of 200,000 to almost 700,000 tons of CO2 equivalents in the most optimistic scenario. And this is less than by factor 4 to the study that Dovolj I just mentioned earlier. So if we take these numbers, we come to about 4 to 12, 13,000 euros per ton CO2. And this obviously is not feasible for short-term climate protection measure. And but we have to state that this is all on the basis of a 3 months implementation. So with originally not intention of prolonging this measure. So of course, do people really change their behavior, their daily patterns when they buy a ticket and they know it's only there for 3 months? It's hard to argue. So it's not expectable that people change their habits within 3 months. So we're going to see what's going to happen. But we as a coalition had a positive evaluation in total. So because the ticket illustrated the positive potentials of public transport. Of course, the unions, as I just said, were rather hesitant, and the social associations were rather positive. But we opted for an extension, which should be affordable for anyone or everyone. So the price should be covered by the social security benefits, simple to use and standardized across the country, like the €9 ticket was. Crucial for that actually is the long-term financing, not the short-term for 22 and 23. And besides all these positive effects, the ticket illustrated the weak spots of the transport system I just talked about. So we did not vote for a mere prolonging of the ticket in the given way it was this summer. And it was evident that the public transport was not adequate to the task. And that's, because of it went to the expense of the employees, as I just mentioned. So we see that heavy investments for HR strategies is very important. And also the handicapped accessibility infrastructure is very important, it's desperately needed. And we see basically the federal government is mainly responsible for that. So such a ticket can only generate an added value, that's at least we see it, if the transport networks are heavily strengthened. So after all this debate we had, the question is, what did we get? So nobody has foreseen that the ticket will be prolonged. That's actually a huge success, to be honest. And civil society shouted out so loud that the government had to prolong the offer, which is, a big success. And at the end, now it's just we just got basically the news 2 weeks ago. We get it now from next year on, we get a ticket for €49 a month, but only as a subscription and as a digital offer. And there's no social welfare ticket, which is the biggest point of critique basically. And it's starting in January 23, at least that's the plan, although probably it won't be possible to really implement it in January. It'll be more like March or April. But still, until last week, the state and the federal government did not agree about the financing. So this was the main struggle point. For 2 months they struggled about the financing. Who would share the cost of the extra €3 billion per year? And the states demanded an extra of 3.3 billion for 22 and 23 to cope with the rising expenses, as well as the increase of the regionalization fund of another 1.5 billion. And in the end, what they got was, not even half of it.
Johannes, we have to slowly come to an end because we have one more presentation. So if we could wrap up, that would be very, very nice.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I thought I said, how long is it? Oh, 30 minutes already. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay. I just want to give you some quotes. Sorry, I didn't look at my watch. So maybe just one. Maike Schäfer is the mobility senator of Bremen. She said, at least by that the states are able to maintain the status quo, but for a real mobility transition, we need to further increase the regionalization fund. So basically, this is all the quotes I wanted to give you from the politicians saying, okay, it's from the states, it's a great effort, but by that, we will have to basically, at least we won't extend the networks, but so sorry. And the way ahead is not clear. How it'll be with the €49. We see this survey here from summer, which stated like by €29 a month, only 26% would buy it. So actually the price is crucial, and also crucial if this ticket really has the capacity for a fair mobility transition. Sorry, that's it. So very short at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Johannes. And I will have one question for you that we discussed before, and that is going back now to your coalition. You, as you said, you have unlikely allies on board, like trade unions from car-related business sector, etc. What are some of your learnings? How to get unlikely partners on board that you really need, but you are generally, reluctant to even contact them. So what have you learned, briefly?
Well, what have we learned? Well, it's been a long way. 3 years ago, we made a little paper together about the transformation of car industry, because obviously also the unions see, especially the unions for the car industry, see the combustion engine is going to an end. Even now the European Commission, now it's done. But 3 or 4 years ago, it was quite obvious, but not done yet. So from the headquarters of these unions, they are trying to really support the companies, also the small companies, in this kind of transformation. So they see the only way to survive is to get the shift to electrical cars, for example. Yeah? So that's why we found, maybe there's a joint point we can support. So that's where we slowly started to talk to each other. And then also, obviously, it's about also people. It's about personal connection. And and it's been a lot of time for coalition building, basically.
Thank you very much. Very inspiring to hear the story of bringing together various partners, including church, which can be food for thought here in Slovenia as well. And thanks for your comprehensive sharing, and all the best.
Thank you very much. If you have any questions or want to reach out, I will send you my contacts.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Hvala. To je tudi spomnik, da vse prezentacije bodo na voljo vsem, ki ste bili prijavljeni in ste pustili podatke po e-pošti, in prav tako vsi videi. Zdaj pa res vabimo še zadnjo predstaviteljico, in sicer bomo slišali lokalno prakso Velenje. In Mirjam Britovšek je univerzitetna diplomirana inženirka kemijskega inženirstva z mestne občine Velenje in članica delovne skupine za trajnostno mobilnost. Pa kar izvolite, boste predstavili, kaj vse se dogaja v Velenju.
Kar s tem, ne? Sam zdaj pa še tole, pa še treba dati. Kaj samo tako, v redu. Lepo pozdravljeni. Hvala organizatorjem za povabilo na to zelo raznoliko in bogato, vsebinsko zelo bogato konferenco. V Velenju poskušamo spodbujati trajnostno mobilnost z brezplačnimi ukrepi. In če pogledate to fotografijo, vidite, da je Velenje omejeno s prostorom za tistimi jezeri, ki so tam v ozadju. To je dolgoletna posledica premogovništva. Mesto se razprostira na 83,5 kvadratnih kilometrih in ima primestne krajevne skupnosti, ki so tudi precej nameščene na gričih. Ima številne naslove. Prvi takih naslov je bila že Evropska nagrada za samo urbanistično zasnovo mesta Velenje. Nastalo je v 50 letih preteklega stoletja. In zadnji od teh pomembnih naslovov je pa Green Leaf 2024, ki ga je občina pridobila praktično pred 14 dnevi v Grenoblu. Mesto je izbrano tudi skupaj z Kranjem in Ljubljano v projekt misija 100 evropsko neutralnih, podnebno neutralnih in pametnih mest. Mi imamo pripravljene projekte, ki so vezani na pametno, zeleno, družbeno, razvojno ter zeleno preobrazbo. Zdaj, kar se tiče same trajnostne mobilnosti, je bila že pred nekaj leti napravljena celostna prometna strategija in cilj te je vsekakor zmanjšati število avtomobilov in usmeriti prebivalce k bolj trajnostni mobilnosti, pa ne samo zaradi zraka, ne samo zaradi izpustov, ne nazadnje tudi zaradi tega, ker gibanje povzroča tudi zelo pozitivne zdravstvene učinke. Piramida, ki je postavljena v tej celostni prometni strategiji, obrača to, bi rekla, širok dostop do avtomobila, ampak je na prvem mestu sedaj pešec, potem kolo, vožnja z tem masovnim transportom in šele na koncu so v bistvu kot po tej piramidi prepoznani vozniki avtomobilov. Že pred leti, mnogimi leti, so se začele nekatere brezplačne storitve. Te so lokalc, prevozi z šolskimi avtobusi, pa boste rekli, ja, se to je po zakonodaji obvezno za osnovnošolce, ja, ampak s temi šolskimi avtobusi se lahko prevažajo tudi, kolikor je razpoložljivega prostora, tudi ostali udeleženci v prometu in tudi občani, šolarji srednjih šol in tako dalje. Potem imamo en tak luškan projekt, to je Kamerad, in sicer je za prevoze starejših občanov ter za invalide, pa ne nazadnje tudi naš sistem BISI. Sam javni prevoz, projekt izhaja že iz leta 2008 in obsega 6 prog. Časovno so ves čas nekako tudi te vozni redi prilagajani glede na potrebe, ki so prepoznane v prostoru, avtobusi vozijo na 15, 30, 60 minut v določenih urah, v različnih časovnih jesenskih, poletnih obdobjih, odvisno od tega, kje in kako so te potrebe prepoznane. Zato je recimo značilna rumena proga, ki vozi do mestnega jezera, kjer se odvija poleti kar precej na široko v bistvu ta turizem, ki ni prepoznan samo v samem mestu, ampak tudi zunaj mesta. V oddaljene krajevne skupnosti je možno priti v določenih dopoldanskih in popoldanskih urah tudi z tem lokalcem. Zdaj tukaj vidite, zelo na veliko je napisano gratis. To zaradi tega, ker ta avtobus vozi na ta način, da mu je podeljena koncesija in se stroški za koncesijo plačujejo iz proračuna občine, kar pomeni, da je za uporabnike povsem zastonj. Vse informacije so za uporabo tega mestnega avtobusa so napravljene preko možnosti Google Maps, tako da vtipkaš, kje greš gor in ti pokaže tudi potem kdaj in kje je najbližja postaja. Potem je to spletna stran, imamo prikazovalnike, ker se sistem ves čas tudi modernizira, so na nekaterih postajah že, na nekaterih bojo pa zdaj v kratkem tudi te digitalni prikazovalniki prihodov, potem imamo zloženko, imamo vozne rede. Zdaj, mogoče vsaj nekaj številk, okrog 300.000 potnikov pripelje v enem letu, v 10-letni koncesiji je to bilo nekaj manj kot 3,5 milijone potnikov. Zdaj, pred 2-3 meseci je bila podeljena nova koncesija za naslednjo obdobje. Sistem, kot sem rekla, se ves čas posodablja. Sedaj poskušamo recimo tudi z bolj modernimi čakališči in za to digitalizacijo še nekako tudi promovirati samo uporabo lokalnega mestnega transporta. Strošek iz proračuna je nekaj manj kot 700.000 na leto. Zdaj, tukaj je karta, zbrala sem tole, ki je za rumeno, zeleno, modro in rdečo in oranžno progo, ki so značilne predvsem za šolske prevoze. Kar se tiče teh šolskih prevozov, je 24 vozil, ki napravijo preko 1500 km dnevno, in da so avtobusi na teh relacijah lahko polni, je omogočena tudi brezplačna uporaba vsem ostalim prebivalcem, kot sem že rekla. Za šolske prevoze je bila pripravljena projektna naloga, ki je obsegala vse tehnične organizacijske zahteve, vse relacije do šol. Oddana je bila torej tudi koncesija. V sistemu samo osnovnošolcev je 730, ki se vozijo iz teh primestnih šol, primestnih krajevnih skupnosti v matične šole in iz proračuna se za to nameni skoraj 1 milijon evrov. Imamo še poseben transport za tiste otroke, ki potrebujejo prevoz do specialnih zavodov. En tak čeden projekt je Kamerad, to je električno vozilo. Mestna občina je že pred mnogimi leti ustanovila svojo lokalno energetsko agencijo. Posledica tega je bila tudi, da imamo na strehi lokalne skupnosti sončno elektrarno. Pred občino je polnilnica. Imamo tudi že nekaj službenih električnih avtomobilov in eden od teh je bil tudi tale Kamerad. Zato so te stroški vzdrževanja relativno nizki, 5000 evrov na leto. Avto vozijo prostovoljci Udarnik, mladinskega centra Velenje, vendar je ta omejitev, da je treba seveda se vnaprej naročiti, kar je na nek način logično, ker ni nihče stalno zaposlen. Zdaj, to projekt od maja do decembra 2021 je bilo opravljenih 146 prevozov v eni smeri in 285 v več smeri. Zdaj, komu je ta projekt namenjen? Kot sem že prej na kratko omenila, starejšim od 65 let in gibalno oviranim. Vendar načela tega projekta so tudi medgeneracijska solidarnost, spodbujanje aktivnega življenja starejših oseb, povezovanje, sodelovanje, spoštovanje narave nenazadnje, glede na to, da se uporablja električno vozilo in seveda tudi podpiranje prostovoljstva. BISI, to je sistem, ki ga lahko uporabljajo občani za izposojo koles. Moram povedati, da smo v letih 2019, 2020, 2021 in 2020 zgradili dodatnih 19 kilometrov kolesarskih povezav, tako da jih imamo zdaj v mestu, sami mestnega omrežja preko 40 kilometrov. Če govorim samo o BISI postajah, imamo 21 postaj in v uporabi je 148 koles, od tega jih je preko 70 električnih, ostali so navadni. V letošnjem letu smo pa dobili tudi novo pridobitev, to je pa transportni tricikl. Omejitev za uporabo tega sistema je 14 ur na teden. In s tem, ko smo s pomočjo evropskih skladov nakupili tudi električna kolesa, smo uvedli to osebno registracijo, drugače morajo biti te kartice, zato da so malo bolj podrobno zbrani podatki in ta registracija pa dejansko pride uporabnika 10 evrov na leto. Drugače se s pomočjo teh sredstev nekoliko izvaja tudi vzdrževanje, ampak je seveda tudi treba dodati iz proračuna. Zdaj, ta projekt je zaživel v letu 2013, se pravi, to je sistem za izposojo koles, s katerim upravlja Zavod za turizem Šaleške doline. Je povezava tudi z sosednjim Šoštanjem, tako da tukaj imamo 2 mesti to povezavo preko teh koles. Dogradili bomo letos 7 nadstreškov, predvsem tam, kjer imamo največ teh električnih koles. Žal pa ugotavljamo, da so težave vandalizem, ker nam poskušajo električna kolesa celo ukrasti. To pa ni najbolj spodbudno. Zdaj, za samo v bistvu spodbujanje uporabe koles, moram reči, da smo v teh projektih izgradnje mestnega kolesarskega omrežja zgradili tudi kar nekaj postajališč za kolesa, tudi v neposredni bližini recimo Gorenja, tako da poskušamo v bistvu tudi z temi zadevami, da je vzgrajena ta infrastruktura, ki jo sicer tudi lahko uporabljaš za uporabo lastnih koles, da imaš varno možnost zakleniti kolo pri bodisi bazenu, pri športnih dvoranah, pri vrtcih, pri šolah, pri glasbeni šoli in tako, smo poskušali v bistvu to kolesarjenje približati prebivalcem. Zdaj, glede same uporabe teh koles sistema BISI, je na razpolago v bistvu tudi aplikacija, ki jo je možno dobiti preko mobilnega androidnega telefona. Drugače je na YouTubeu tudi v bistvu, tu sem samo dala povezavo, ne glih link na to, kako video navodilo, kako se uporablja ta sistem. Potem imamo tudi promocijski film. Tole je recimo, če se gre preko te aplikacije, da se vidi, kje so vse te postaje. Seveda pa razmišljamo tudi o tem, kako še tudi v bodoče. Zdaj, zaživel je že bicikl bus, ki obratuje v poletnih mesecih, tu je relativno nizka cena in imaš možnost, da pelješ kolo do Logarske doline, kjer potem kolesariš, pa potem zopet nazaj, ali samo v eni smeri, ali v obeh smerih, to je stvar posameznika. Prav tako imamo povezavo do Dravske kolesarske poti. Moram povedati, da se sedaj tudi gradi še povezava, regionalna povezava proti Mislini, tako da potem bo ta pot Dravska dosegljiva tudi čisto s kolesom. No, in ta bicikl bus pripelje tudi do Labota v Avstriji. Potem imamo še nekako željo optimizirati proge med mestom in samim podeželjem. Od leta 2020 izvajamo tudi meritve, koliko kolesarjev se vozi. Imamo možnosti tudi skupne uporabe avtomobilov, se pravi službenih avtomobilov, tako v naši upravi kot v javnih zavodih. Poskušamo čim bolj omejevati parkiranje v samem središču mesta. Želje so pa seveda, da bi tudi prišli do določenih dogovorov za uporabo multimodalnosti in sicer tako, da bi se uspeli dogovoriti tudi še z železnicami za kakšne ugodnosti. Je pa ena pridobitev že to, da imamo sedaj že vlak, ki občasno pripelje v Velenje takšen, da se da gor lahko kolo. No, potem še mogoče tale predzadnji slajd. Rekla sem, da imamo povezave do 5 merilnikov na teh nekih točkah in v letu 2021 smo zmerili, da se je preko teh točk prepeljalo 200.000 kolesarjev. Tako da, hvala lepa in vaše vprašanje.
Je kakšno zelo živo vprašanje za gospod Britovšek? Aha, evo, dve sta, eno pa drugo.
Ne vem sicer, kako je v Velenju, samo mogoče primer Ljubljane. Ena zadeva, ki je v redu, je to, da se mesto zapira za promet, ampak kontradiktorno je pa, da se postavljajo recimo nove garažne hiše v središču mesta, kar se tudi v Ljubljani dogaja. Tako da me zanima, če imate tudi vi kakšne take načrte ali ste pametnejši od naše mestne občine.
Pri nas moram povedati, da imamo nekaj garažnih hiš že zgrajenih in poskušamo zdaj iz teh prometnih površin iz mesta preusmerjati z politiko taksiranja oziroma cenovno politiko preusmerjati v garažne hiše, da bi mesto nekako postalo bolj odprto za pešce in kolesarje. Drugače pa smo imeli željo po park and ride, ampak ker še nimamo zgrajene, bom rekla, povezave, hitre ceste, še ta park and ride za nas ni prišel v poštev.
Zdravo, eno vprašanje, tam une statistike so bile ful dobre od avtobusa, koliko jih uporabljajo. Koliko je pa prej potem, ko ste to dodala, so zdaj avtobusi zaradi tega polhni? Ali pa se ful več uporablja tega? Tega nisem mogel razbrati, koliko je bilo preden ste to začela.
Mi imamo zastonj uporabo avtobusa že iz leta 2008 dalje, ves čas.
Ampak ko se to realno vidite, da je več ljudi na avtobusih, to me
Je
zanima.
več ljudi, čeprav zdaj v bistvu v času korone so te statistike zdaj bile malo drugačne. Ne? Pa zdaj imamo v bistvu novo koncesijo in iz letnih poročil se pa dejansko vidijo te statistike, ampak tako podrobno nisem šla v te zadeve. Ne? Hvala vam.
Ja, hvala lepa vsem predavateljem in seveda tudi obiskovalcem in tudi za vaše izkušnje in ideje. Zdaj glede na čas, vas bomo povabili, da date povratno informacijo o konferenci, kaj vam je bilo dragoceno, kako bi lahko še izboljšali. Naknadno, ko boste dobili e-pošto z vsemi gradivi. Tako da bi jaz za zaključno besedo kar povabila Gajo Brecelj z Umanotere, da pove, kar je še potrebno, da se potem razidemo.
Hvala Marjeta, jaz sem tukaj v ozadju že ves čas. Tako da bi se vam tudi jaz v imenu Umanotere in Focusa zahvalila za udeležbo. Mene predvsem veseli, da se uspemo že 7 let srečevati na teh letnih konferencah in se mi zdi, da nekako tudi vedno bolje je v javnosti prepoznano to, da so skupnostni projekti res lahko dober odziv na podnebno krizo, obenem zdaj tudi na draginjo, kot smo danes slišali. Mogoče bi dodala še en aspekt tukaj, se mi zdi, da v času prihajajoče draginje je še pa pomemben ta socialni vidik. Skupnostni projekti dejansko poskrbijo tudi za vsakega člena skupnosti in bodo na ta način pomemben doprinos pri zagotavljanju nekega zdravega družbenega ekosistema. Zdaj jasno rabijo veliko sistemske podpore, kaj pa mi ponujamo, nevladne organizacije z tega področja, je pa svetovanje oziroma pač nekako občine vzamemo pod okrilje in jih podpremo v izvajanju skupnostnih projektov. Že kar nekaj občin smo na ta način dali čez, bom rekla, trenutno smo v Hrastniku, Postojni, v Posočju, 3 občinah, Kočevje, pa mislim, da je še kakšna, nekaj smo jih že. Tako da vabljeni, če ste iz občin, pa če rabite to vrstno podporo, da se nam oglasite. Druga stvar je, imamo en kup zanimivih gradiv na spletni strani, priročnikov, ki jih tudi žal nismo mogli sem več prinesti, ki so sam še v elektronski obliki za različne skupnostne projekte, od skupnostnih sončnih elektrarn, skupnostnega vrtička na turističnem področju, skratka res širok diapazon in pa naša baza dobrih praks. Že več kot 80 smo jih zbrali in če imate kakšno dobro prakso iz vašega lokalnega okolja, torej da je tako skupnostna kot trajnostna, le vpište jo na zemljevid Dovolj za vse, zato ker to je nek način učenja drug od drugega, pa da pokažemo pravzaprav, da nas je že kar velik in da počasi ta miselnost lahko prevlada nad, mogoče bom tako rekla, fosilno, zastarelo miselnostjo. Tako da še enkrat hvala in upam, da se vidimo spet naslednje leto.